Can we start by talking about these huge tax cut promises from Rishi Sunak, who claims that he saved these to unveil today because it's the day that the voting begins in the membership? But is there an element of desperation, do you think, in such a wide-ranging income tax cut, given that he's criticised Liz Truss extensively for the same thing?
Rishi Sunak has tried to build his reputation on saying that he's not going to do immediate tax cuts, and that's definitely come back to bite him when it came to the polling. We have seen Liz Truss starting to really pull ahead. And yes, I think definitely there is a sense of desperation here that he knows once these ballots have gone out, people are going to vote. We expect the vast majority of Tory members will have made up their minds and will be voting in the coming days. So he knows now is potentially his last opportunity to turn the tide and try to regain some of that momentum that he's lost.
Yeah. What's the status now of these ballots? Because I'm a bit confused. I mean, the suggestion was that everyone will have made their mind up now and it will be set in stone, that that means Rishi Sunak won't have the time to make up. But I gather they can actually change their minds effectively by going back and voting again online, is that right?
That's absolutely right. So everyone is getting a ballot paper through the post, which are set to land from today. They'll be there in the next 72 hours or so. Now, they can vote immediately with their paper ballot and send it straight back off. But if suddenly they decided on the 31st of August that, you know, actually, I've changed my mind, you can go online and re-vote, and whatever the last vote you give will be the one that counts.
Right, so it's still worth them with all the candidates fighting then, yeah?
So there is no point in Rishi Sunak throwing in the towel now and going, you know what, it looks like it's Liz Truss's, I give up, because there's still plenty of time to turn this around.
Although it really does look as though momentum's gathering behind Liz Truss, not least in the fact Nadhim Zahawi, the latest to back her. We saw Ben Wallace last week, Tom Tugendhat, of course, all big players, all members of the cabinet. We've got Therese Coffey coming on the programme a little bit later on. She was being mooted as a possible chancellor in any future cabinets. Give us a sense then of the direction of her campaign now.
Well, I think what's really interesting is you saw with Ben Wallace, he was keeping very much out of the contest. He was saying, I'm focusing on my job, I'm focusing on defence, I'm not going to endorse someone. You saw the same with Nadhim Zahawi after he dropped out. He implied that he was going to stay neutral, had to focus on the economy, he wasn't going to get involved. But as it began to look obvious who's going to be the winner, suddenly they feel quite happy endorsing Liz Truss. And I think that's because they've begun to see the way that it's moving. They know that there's a low risk now.
What was that Boris Johnson quote? When the herd moves, it moves.
Absolutely.
How true that is. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, let's head down to South Gloucestershire now to speak to one of our GB News viewers and listeners, Roy Garner. And Roy, thanks for joining us, because, of course, you were a Conservative councillor for many years, indeed a chairman of a Conservative association. Have you made your mind up yet?
I'm no longer a member. I left the Conservative Party. Well, no, I believe that the Conservative Party left me. Basically, in the last few years, they've been anything other than Conservatives. They've lost all of the basics. If you look at anything, the financial status of the country, they've lost it. We're now being treated to people who are saying that they're going to do tax cuts when in the last couple of years they've been doing nothing but tax and spend. I don't think there's a government department that's actually been performing. In the private sector, you know, many of these people would have been sacked.
Roy, I wonder if you were still a member in 2001. Lots of comparisons have been made with the Ian Duncan Smith, Ken Clarke moment, and the comparison being with Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, that perhaps the membership are going with their hearts rather than with their heads on this in terms of electability at a general election.
I think at the moment Liz Truss is more believable. I'm very disappointed on her statement, alleged statement, where she wants to make it illegal to catcall. I mean, that is unenforceable. You know, you don't create laws that are unenforceable. You know, apparently the crime rate at the moment is police are getting 1.8% to court. Well, with that sort of thing, there needs to be an awful lot of rethink about the whole thing. And I hope that whoever wins through starts looking at those sort of things. I mean, the police and the crime commission.
Yeah, from what you're saying, obviously this at the moment is an election for the Tory party leadership. But of course, they become Prime Minister. We could be getting a general election in 18 months or less, even though it could stretch to 2 years. What does this say to you about the Tory party chances of returning to power at a next general election?
As they stand now, no chance.
Wow.
They're very fortunate. They're very fortunate that they've got no opposition. You know, the Labour Party has no credibility whatsoever. The Liberal Democrats, well, they're the Liberal Democrats, have not been in power for many years. I think that there's an opening now for the groupings like Reform Party and so on. Independents, I think, are more likely to come through at the next election. The political class has lost an awful lot of trust.
Roy, it's been absolutely delightful to talk to you. Roy Garner, thank you very much for getting in touch with us. And lovely part of the world you're in, South Gloucestershire. I know it well. I hope you have some sunshine there today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Another thought to you, Dan, if I may, just on some of the comments being made there. I mean, if Liz Truss is going to be the clear winner, what do you make of her electability?
Well, I think what's going to be interesting is, at the moment, Liz Truss is very much going for the Tory party membership. When it then comes to being Prime Minister, she will then be able to turn her attention to winning over voters as a whole. What I think is really interesting in all of this is what Labour are doing. And to go back to Roy there, what we've seen is Labour aren't coming out and announcing great big policies. Keir Starmer has tried to, in many ways, you can see that he's trying to replicate what Tony Blair did with the Labour Party. Now, Tony Blair had a saying where he said, when you know you're going to win, that's when you fight as if you're not going to. And that's what we don't seem to be seeing from Labour. They seem to be quite happy and comfortable sitting ahead.
Right. Is that because he's keeping his powder dry, or he's really still got trouble with the left wing of the party as to which direction they take to put this stall out for a general election?
Well, I think we've got, as you said, we've got an election coming up soon, so he's going to have to put those arguments with his party to bed and start focusing outwardly. And therefore, while Labour aren't making great big policies, don't write off the Conservatives at all, because they could turn this around yet. Labour aren't whizzing ahead and creating some vision that's bringing the country along with them.
Speaking of not writing people off, a final thought about Boris Johnson. Many of our viewers and listeners still very, very sad about what's happened and how it's unfolded. He, of course, had his big wedding celebration over the weekend, and he's been quoted in the papers this morning as saying it was the biggest stitch-up since the Bayeux Tapestry, typically Boris Johnson-type style comment. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's always hard to know with Boris Johnson where he's being serious and where he's having a bit of a joke, and he knows that he's very popular. He knows that sort of comment goes down well. The idea of him returning, I think it's difficult to see any time soon. I think we'll see him probably put his head down, disappear from mainstream politics for a while, but I think we'll see him back in a few years' time. Maybe not on the front line, maybe not on the green benches, but we're not going to have seen the last of Boris Johnson.